Sometimes, when I was falling asleep, I could hear the ceiling creak, like someone was shifting their weight directly above my bed. It wasn't constant. It didn't happen every night. But when it did, it was so specific. Not wind, not wood settling. It had rhythm, intent, something, or someone, up there moving slowly across the ceiling, just above where my head lay on the pillow. I moved into the unit in October. I'd just finalized my divorce, and everything I owned fit in the back of a U-Haul. The place was a compact one-bedroom at the rear end of a converted house in central Minnesota. It had slanted ceilings, cracked crown molding, and a water heater that groaned when you ran a shower too long. But the rent was cheap, and the owner, an older guy named Dennis, lived in the front unit. Said he kept the place mostly quiet. He gave me the tour and mentioned the attic space. Well, technically, the crawl space above the ceiling. Don't worry about it, he said. No access from your unit. It sets just fiberglass and ductwork, sealed decades ago. That first month, I slept better than I had in a long time. Then came the sounds. Subtle at first, a dull creak like weight shifting across an old beam, a patter, then silence. I told myself it was squirrels, maybe mice, but it didn't feel random. It felt timed, always late, always when the world was still, between 2 and 4 a.m., usually. One night, I was half asleep when I heard 3 distinct thuds, soft, heavy, then a dragging sound. My eyes snapped open. The ceiling above my bed was low and slanted, with a sealed panel near the center. Nothing fancy, just drywall with a thin wooden outline. But suddenly it felt like a lid. I stared at it in the dark for what felt like an hour. The next day, I mentioned it to Dennis when I saw him raking leaves in the front yard. Probably raccoons, he said. They get bold this time of year. Could they get into the attic? He shook his head. Not that one. It sits sealed tight, just beams and insulation. No access. I nodded, but the unease didn't go away. A few days later, I found dust on my pillow. Not a lot, just a faint sprinkle of fine gray powder, like something had shaken the insulation loose. I looked up. The panel above me was slightly darker at the edges. I stood on my bed and reached up. The wood around the seams felt soft, fragile, like it had been pushed from the other side. That night, I set my phone to record audio while I slept. I placed it face down on the nightstand and left it running. In the morning I listened. 3 faint thumps, then silence. Then at the 3:12 a.m. mark, a dragging noise, long and slow, like something was being pulled across wood. No scampering, no claws, nothing animal-like, just movement. I sent the recording to 2 friends. One said it had to be a raccoon, or maybe a big squirrel. The other joked it sounded like a ghost. But neither could explain the dragging. I didn't want to believe the obvious, that someone, a person, might be up there. But what animal drags things for fun? Things escalated when I woke up at 3:30 one morning to the distinct sound of breathing. Not mine, not the heater. Slow, shallow breaths above me. I held my own breath just to make sure. It didn't stop. I flipped on the lamp, and the sound vanished. Just like that. I spent the rest of the night sitting up in bed with the light on. I didn't know what to do. Calling the police felt dramatic. Dennis would just tell me. Again, it was sealed. I needed proof, something tangible. So I bought a folding chair the next day, the kind you'd use for painting, and that night I waited. At 2:57 a.m., the ceiling creaked. I grabbed the chair, positioned it under the panel, and climbed up. My hands shook as I pressed against the wood. It moved. Not much, but enough. The panel lifted with a soft crackle of dust. I grabbed a flashlight and slowly pushed it open. The beam lit up fiberglass insulation, wooden beams, and a thick cloud of floating dust. And then something else. Resting on the beam directly above where my bed sat, a crumpled, tattered blanket, a half-empty water bottle, and a candy wrapper. I froze. I scanned the rest of the narrow crawl space, but saw no one, no holes, no obvious entrance. But then I saw something tucked just behind a beam. A flip phone. Old, dead, cracked screen. But real. I climbed down, shut the panel, and backed away. I called the police. They arrived within 20 minutes. One officer climbed up, flashlight in hand, while the other stayed with me. Eventually, the first one came back down. His face was blank. He said someone had definitely been up there. No footprints, but there were signs, blankets, wrappers, a makeshift urinal made from a cut water jug. They had no idea how they got in. No sign of forced entry from the outside. The crawl space connected only over my unit. The rest of the building was sealed. They said it was possible someone had climbed in months ago, maybe even during renovation, and had been hiding there since. Not the first time something like this has happened. One of them told me. That didn't set help. I couldn't sleep that night, or the night after. I moved my bed to the living room, away from that ceiling. Dennis installed a deadbolt on the attic panel, though I'm not sure that would stop anyone determined enough. A few days later, I went back up one last time to clear my head, just to prove to myself it was over. I brought a broom, swept away some of the old dust. That's when I found it, wedged between the beam and insulation. A photograph, faded, curling at the edges. It showed me, asleep in my bed. The angle was unmistakable, taken from the ceiling, directly above. My mouth was slightly open, my hand resting on my chest, and just behind the blur of my head, in the shadows, a faint silhouette of a knee. A person crouched low behind the beam, just barely out of sight. I moved out that week. I still don't yet know how long they were up there. But sometimes, when I lie in bed at night, I still hear faint creaks above me, and I stare at the ceiling, wondering who's watching and how close they are. The door to the basement was always locked, until the day it wasn't. When I first moved into the house, I didn't think much about it. Just an old 3-story place in a quiet neighborhood, barely affordable, even with 2 other roommates. The wood floors creaked, the windows stuck in their frames, and the kitchen light buzzed like it was trying to die. Nothing unusual, just old. The landlord, some guy named Rick, was barely around. We paid through an app. He answered texts with one-word replies, and he'd only shown up once to replace a smoke detector. The place wasn't fancy, but it had space, and I needed somewhere close to campus. What did stand out, though, was the door at the end of the hallway. Heavy, dark-stained wood, with a tarnished brass knob. It had a keyhole, but none of us had a key. We assumed it led to the basement utilities, storage, whatever landlords don't want renters messing with. No one questioned it, until the night I came home late from the library. It was a little after midnight. The hallway was dim, just a single bulb overhead. I was halfway to my room when I noticed the basement door was cracked open. Maybe an inch, just enough to catch a sliver of shadow. I stopped. The air near it felt colder. Not cold like a draft. Cold like stillness, heavy and stale. I called out, "Hello," half expecting one of my roommates to answer, or maybe Rick doing some surprise maintenance. Nothing. I nudged the door open a little more. It gave with a soft groan. Stale air spilled out, thick with mildew and dust. A narrow set of stairs disappeared into the dark. No light switch in sight, just stairs in the kind of black that eats light. I stood there, uneasy, for a full minute before shutting the door. The next day, it was locked again. I asked Sam, my roommate, if he'd opened it. "Nope," he said, barely looking up from his laptop. "I thought that thing was sealed shut." I asked Lily. She shook her head and muttered something about it being creepy. We let it go. But then things started shifting. At night, just as I was about to fall asleep, I'd hear these muffled sounds, dull thuds from below. Not pipes, or the house settling. Deeper than that, almost like something heavy dropping to the cement and being dragged. At first I thought maybe Rick had a maintenance guy coming by, but I never saw anyone, and the door stayed locked. Then one morning, I woke up to find a small piece of fabric under my door, torn, dark gray, and damp, like it had been in someone's hand or mouth. I stared at it for a long time. None of us had rugs that color. I knocked on Sam's door. He opened it, groggy, shirtless. "Did you leave this?" He looked at it, shook his head. No idea where that came from. I tried brushing it off. Old house, weird drafts. Maybe a vent kicked it loose. But it didn't sit right. I couldn't shake the feeling. A few nights later, I was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep, when I felt a low vibration through the mattress. Not movement, vibration. Like someone walking slowly, but far beneath me. Deliberate footsteps under the floor. I held my breath. They stopped. I got up, heart pounding, and checked the vent near the baseboard. It was slightly off its frame. I crouched down to look inside. At first, I saw nothing but dark. Then my phone light caught something. Metallic, a screw, and next to it, the crumpled foil from a protein bar. The same kind Sam and I both kept in the kitchen drawer. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I texted Rick. "Hey, just wondering, is there a storage area or access tunnel under the bedrooms? We suck are hearing weird noises." He replied 3 hours later. "No crawl space. Basement only. Locked for years." That was it. I showed Sam the message, and we both just stared at each other. Then I told him what I'd seen in the vent. He looked nervous. We decided to check the basement. Together. It was a Saturday afternoon, and the sun was still out. That made it feel slightly less insane. To our surprise, the door was unlocked again. We exchanged a look and slowly opened it. The air that hit us was damp and metallic. Old, like rust and mold, had been baking together for years. We stepped down into darkness, phone flashlights trembling in our hands. The stairs creaked under our weight. Each step echoed off the cement walls. At the bottom, the space opened into a wide, unfinished basement. Exposed beams, cracked floors, water stains along the corners. Then we saw the door. It was tucked in the far left corner. Metal rusted at the hinges, with a padlock that was hanging open. I hesitated. Sam reached out and pulled it slowly. Inside was a small, windowless room. The floor was covered in stained blankets. Torn ones. A cracked mirror leaned against the wall. Takeout containers were stacked neatly in one corner. Dozens of them. And worst of all, scratched into the back wall with what looked like a nail or piece of metal, were the words, "I listen when they sleep." We backed out. Silent. Breathless. Neither of us said anything until we were upstairs again. Then Sam muttered, "I'd been out." Lily moved out the next day. I left that weekend. I tried calling Rick again. Left a voicemail this time. Told him what we found. No response. A week later, I drove by the house. The front curtains were drawn. A for rent sign was posted in the yard. I never went back. Sometimes, late at night, I'll wake up, thinking I hear that same dragging sound. Dull, heavy and slow. And I wonder how long had someone been living down there? And more importantly, how many nights had they listened to me sleeping? The realtor said the attic was sealed shut decades ago. So why was there fresh dust on the floor beneath it? We bought the house because it was cheap, and because we were naive enough to believe that sweat equity could make it into a dream home. Alyssa and I had just gotten married a few months prior. Late 20s, city burnout, looking for a reset. The place was a 2-story farmhouse tucked into a tree-lined lot in rural Oregon. The kind of property that had potential written all over it, if you could overlook the warped floors and flaking paint. During the walkthrough, the realtor was honest. At least I think she was. She pointed to the ceiling in the upstairs hallway, where a small square of wood sat flush with the plaster. "That's the attic," she said casually. "Sealed shut a long time ago. No stairs. No reason to go poking around." Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes when she said that. We nodded, distracted by more pressing concerns, like replacing the water heater and gutting the avocado-colored kitchen. For the first few weeks, everything was normal, busy, chaotic even. We spent our days sanding floors, and our nights passed out on an air mattress in the living room. The upstairs hallway was just a conduit between the two bedrooms and the one working bathroom. But then one afternoon, late October, I was repainting that hallway while Alyssa ran errands in town. I was crouched near the baseboards, cutting in trim, when I noticed something odd. A faint outline in the dust. Right below the trapdoor, a perfect square of slightly cleaner wood, maybe 3 feet across, as if something had recently shifted, opened, even, and disturbed the years of dust clinging to the floor. I stood there, staring at it longer than I'd like to admit. My first thought was that maybe a draft had done it, but the windows were all closed. My second thought was that maybe the ceiling had sagged a little from age. That seemed plausible, comforting, even. But the unease stuck with me. That night I mentioned it to Alyssa while we were eating takeout on the porch. She shrugged. "Probably nothing. We already have enough to fix. Let's not make more problems for ourselves." She was right, but I couldn't let it go. A few days later, she had a late meeting in town. I was home alone, the sky darkening by 5, wind rustling the trees in that way that makes a house feel especially old and hollow. The hallway was quiet, too quiet. I grabbed a stepladder from the garage, a chisel, and a flashlight. The paint sealing the trapdoor wasn't thick, just brittle layers, dry from decades of neglect. I chipped at it until the edge of the panel loosened with a soft crack. I hesitated for a second, then pushed. It opened easier than I expected, with a sigh of disturbed air. The smell that rolled out hit me instantly, like mothballs, mildew, and something worse. Something sour, organic. I climbed up slowly. The attic was cramped and low, just enough space to crouch. My flashlight beam swept across old furniture draped in spiderwebs, a cracked rocking horse, faded boxes of newspapers dated 1984. And then I saw them. Boot prints. Clear impressions in the dust. They started near the far corner, crossed the floor in a slow, deliberate path, straight to the trapdoor I had just opened. My skin went cold. I scanned the room again and spotted something even worse. A thin mattress, partially unrolled, nestled between two crates. There was a crumpled blanket, a plastic water bottle. Someone had been staying up here. Recently. I backed down the ladder fast, slammed the trapdoor shut, and bolted it with an old chain I found in the shed. I didn't sleep that night. When I told Alyssa the next morning, she was quiet. "Maybe someone was squatting here before we moved in," she offered. "Maybe they came back." We called the sheriff. He checked the attic, but there was nothing, no one, just the things I'd described. No fingerprints, no clear entry point. He said we probably scared them off. Probably, but things changed after that. At night, we started hearing noises. Light scratching sounds, soft clicks, like fingernails on wood. Sometimes a thud, like something falling or being dropped, just above the hallway. Our dog, Luna, began refusing to go upstairs at all. She'd plant her feet at the bottom of the stairs and growl low in her throat, ears back, eyes fixed on the ceiling. One night, around 2 a.m., Alyssa shook me awake. "Kevin," she whispered. The trapdoor moved. I sat up, heart hammering. "What?" I saw it, just a little, like it flexed. We sat there, staring into the dark. I listened for any sound, anything. But the house stayed quiet. The next morning, I didn't care if it sounded crazy. I nailed the trap door shut, not just one nail, a dozen. I hammered them in until the panel was flush and sealed tight. Then I painted over it again, just like it had been before. I felt a weird sense of relief, like I had sealed something in, or maybe sealed it out. That peace lasted one night. The next morning, we woke up to find the hallway floor littered with nails. The trap door was still closed, but now it looked slightly off, like it had shifted in its frame. On the wall beside it, smeared in soot or ash, were 5 words written in uneven letters. "Why did you let me out?" We stared at it, unable to speak. Alyssa started crying. I held her, trying to keep it together, but I was shaking too. That same day, we packed what we could fit in the truck and left. We didn't sell the house right away. We just left, booked a motel, and never went back inside. Alyssa's uncle helped arrange the paperwork from afar. We sold it at a loss a month later. Every once in a while I think about that attic, about the boot prints, the mattress, the message. Whatever was up there, I don't think it ever left. And the worst part? We were the ones who opened the door.